the story on the air. And he said to the producer, yeah, put this in the newscast, move it up to a lead if it's sufficient, told me to come to his office. And I went into his office, and he closed the door. And he gave me some advice that I would give to any journalist today, which is this business of journalism is not a popularity contest. You're not going to make a lot of friends. You're going to make some. But if 50% of the people don't like you and 50% don't hate you, you're not doing your job very well. Because it's really about being the eyes and ears of the public. And you have access to go into places and to see people that the average person can't always do. And if you don't take that seriously and if you don't represent them well in getting the information and reporting back to them fairly, whether it's the mayor of a local city or the president of the United States, you don't deserve to be a member of this fourth estate. And it was a lesson that I learned very young, and I carried with me to this day. And I feel very strongly about that, and it also helps me as I try to help guide this nonprofit group, the Freedom of Information Foundation, forward. We're not just a media group. We represent everybody because the Public Information Act and the Open Meetings Act of Texas, and even at the federal level, affects us all. And so we are diversifying our membership and our supporters. We have embraced some of the new technologies of social media. We're on Facebook and Twitter and all that sort of thing because they are really fast vehicles to get a message out to a large number of people. And if you're not already a supporter, we always would like to have your support. Just like the Texas Observer, we are a nonprofit. We depend on supporters to help finance our operations. And I can tell you, some of the lobbyist groups that we go up against here in Austin are well financed, and they have a big army of supporters to get their message out. In our office, there's 2 of us and an intern that we've been able to convince to keep coming in, even though his internship is up. So we're very grateful for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Keith Elkins, Texas Freedom Network, and thank you, Carl of Texas Observer. Now we have some room for questions. You'll be next.
First of all, I want to thank you for coming to the First Unitarian Church, the oldest public affairs forum in the city. Thank you so much. I have a question that deals with our lack of a medical school in Austin. I've been trying to uncover the fact, and it's been so difficult. And then I asked myself, are you guys afraid of some interest in this town? I always hear that the legislature doesn't like Austin. I don't want to hear that one. I just want to know why we don't have a medical school here. And secondly, are you afraid to tell us?
Are you addressing that to anybody in particular?
Well, I don't know the answer to the question, but I do know that the politics of universities and where the legislature is going to put medical schools, law schools, and so forth has been around as long as the universities have been around and as long as the legislature have been around. There are powerful interests in Dallas, for example, that political interests that don't want any competition, in San Antonio, that don't want the competition of a new medical school, no matter where it is. There's also a bias, I think, in the legislature against Austin, which is, by everybody's estimation, I think, probably more progressive than any other part of the state. And so I think that plays into it.
I was referring to interest within the city.
Quite possible. I don't know the answer to that either, although, the University of Texas itself is very powerful, and it has a vested interest in its medical schools in Galveston and San Antonio and Dallas. I don't know the answer. I mean, very possibly is what I would say.
Yeah, and as executive director of the Freedom of Information Foundation, I don't know if I can help you with that, except I could help you file requests. I don't know where we go to start with, but I can tell you as a former journalist that has covered the Capitol for a long time, It's a lot of what Carlton said, and even what you didn't want to hear about Austin. There is a bias at the legislature about Austin. And it's not too difficult to understand why when you look back. I think times are changing now, but if you look back just a few years, Austin was the only blue dot on a red state map. When lawmakers come to Austin, they don't particularly like being here for a lot of different reasons, and they don't particularly think that Austin is representative of the state. Beyond that, you've got to think about the other things, and I think that the fact that we have a governor that is probably the #1 Aggie in the state, that all plays into it. The University of Texas and the Texas A&M University, some members of the legislature feel like they've already got their share of the pie, and the outlying areas ought to have their part. There was an effort for a long time, I have no idea how many years that went on to get a medical school, I believe, placed out in El Paso, and it finally passed the legislature to a lot of applause and a lot of good feelings. The problem was they didn't appropriate any money. They just said you can have a medical school, but they didn't appropriate any money to go along with it. So, it took a long time. I think the funds may have been appropriated by now, but there are a lot of regional versus urban interest involved, I think. There is a lot of lobbying for competing dollars at these different universities. That fight has been around as a long time, as you know, and I suspect it still will be.
Let me add one more thing that the medical community is always complaining, and I'll confess that I once worked for the Trial Lawyers Association in D.C., so I have a little bit of a bias, but have always been complaining that there aren't enough doctors in various parts of the state, not enough specialists, and so forth. Well, they're right, but you know who lobbies against more medical schools and more students in medical schools? The TMA and the AMA, because they don't want competition.
Thank you for your presentations. My name is Kurt Johnson. I'm an author, and I've recently been involved in some trench warfare with Williamson County involving some open records requests. And what has happened is that when they don't want to give you something, which is really the rule rather than the exception, they object to the Attorney General, and it goes into a black hole. And recently, I decided I was tired of that, so I submitted my own brief to the Attorney General, who, by the way, goes to the Reagan dinner in Williamson County every year, very strong Republican, and he agreed with me and agreed that I should get the information that I wanted. And I was very surprised at that, but one of the interesting footnotes is that I was doing something while all this was going on, and that is, as all of this correspondence was being generated, I put it on a website page so that everybody could see it and could track how lame the excuses were. So I guess my question is, with regard to an ordinary citizen that is trying to get information from government and it goes into the black hole, it would be, number one, to suggest to the Texas Observer that you're right with regard to the valid use of the internet with regard to making things available to the public, but as well to ask what sort of advice you could give to citizens who are in need of resources having to do with attacking the process when these subversive tactics of going to the Attorney General are used.
I'll take a stab at that if you don't mind. That's what we do all the time. And the only thing I could recommend in your particular case is, as you move forward, feel free to add our email address onto your CC. We work with the Attorney General's office on a regular basis, and they know what we do, and they know that we have the opportunity and the ability to make some waves when necessary. It's an interesting position because the Attorney General is an elected position and there is politics involved. The Attorney General obviously must weigh the balance of open government. That doesn't always fall in the favor of his particular party. And And I will say that he has ruled against his party on a number of occasions. There is a situation right now involving the district attorney in Williamson County, a little battle that we are also involved in, involving the Texas Forensic Science Commission. And for those of you that may not be familiar, the Texas Forensic Science Commission was created by the legislature a couple of years ago because there was some indication that people were being convicted based on evidence that was flawed or faulty, or some people call junk science. And they wanted this professional